How does the tech that runs our world really work? We break it down to its fundamental truths. This is First Principles.
You're sitting in a coffee shop. The air smells of roasted beans and steamed milk. You can hear the low hum of the espresso machine, the clinking of ceramic mugs, the quiet murmur of a dozen different conversations. You open your laptop, click the little icon in the corner of your screen, a symbol of 3 curved lines, fanning out like a stylized broadcast. A list of names appears. You click on the one for the coffee shop. A few seconds pass, and that's it. You're connected. You open a web browser. You check your email. You scroll through the news. Maybe you open up a streaming service and press play on a movie. And there it is, a high-definition feature-length film, flowing from somewhere out there on the internet, through the walls of this building and onto your screen. It's seamless. It's instant. It's so completely normal that we don't even think of it as technology anymore. It's just there, like the air we breathe. We call it Wi-Fi, and we have a sort of vague, intuitive understanding of how it works. We know there's a box somewhere in the room, probably tucked away on a shelf behind the counter with a few blinking lights, a router, and that box is somehow taking the internet from a wire and, well, making it not a wire. It's broadcasting the internet, like a radio station, but for data. It feels simple enough. It just works. But have you ever really stopped to wonder how that actually works? I mean, really think about it. The air in this coffee shop isn't empty. It's a chaotic, invisible storm. It's filled with the signals from every other phone and laptop in the room. It's flooded with the Bluetooth signals from everyone's wireless headphones. The signal from the local radio station is passing right through your head. So is the signal for the television channels, the GPS signals from orbit, the cellular signals connecting people's phones to a distant tower. It is an absolute cacophony of electromagnetic radiation. And yet, your laptop is able to listen to this roaring storm and pluck out one single coherent stream of information, flawlessly reassembling it into the movie you're watching. How? How does it distinguish the signal meant for you from the one meant for the person at the next table? How do you send something as complex as a video file using nothing but invisible waves? What are the fundamental, irreducible rules, the first principles that make this everyday magic possible? Today, we are opening the black box of Wi-Fi. We're going to look past the blinking lights and the familiar 3-line symbol and uncover the elegant, surprisingly simple system that turned the very air around us into a conduit for the world's information. Before we can appreciate the solution, we have to appreciate the problem. And for Wi-Fi, the problem isn't just about cutting a cable. It's about conquering the chaos of the open air, the magic we see, the magic we take for granted every single day, is the illusion of a dedicated private connection in a world that is anything but. Think about the sheer scale of it. It's not just the coffee shop. It's an airport terminal, with thousands of people all pulling up boarding passes, checking for delays, streaming shows to pass the time. It's a sports stadium, where 50,000 phones are all trying to connect at once. It's a dense city block, where the Wi-Fi signal from your apartment is competing with signals from 20 other apartments in every direction, above you, below you, and on all sides. Our modern lives are built on the assumption that this system will just work. It's not a luxury anymore. It's a utility, as essential as electricity or running water. Businesses rely on it for their transactions. Schools rely on it for their teaching. We rely on it for our work, our entertainment, our connection to friends and family. The world would grind to a halt without it, and yet, the physical reality of what it's doing is astounding. It's managing a city's worth of traffic in an invisible space, with no traffic lights, no stop signs, and no painted lanes. The fundamental promise of Wi-Fi is the same as the promise of a simple Ethernet cable you plug into the wall. It gives you a clean, stable connection to the internet, but a cable is a private, isolated universe. It's a closed system. The electrical signals traveling down that copper wire are shielded from the outside world. There's no interference. It's a simple, one-on-one conversation between your computer and the router. Wi-Fi has to create that same experience of a private, stable connection, but it has to do it in a public park, in a crowded town square. Everyone is talking at once, and you have to have a perfectly clear conversation with your friend on the other side of the fountain. That is the magic of Wi-Fi. Not that it's wireless, but that it creates order out of absolute chaos. To understand how we arrived at this solution, we have to go back in time to a world bound by copper, a world of wires. For most of human history, long-distance communication was tied to a physical object, a letter, a messenger on a horse. And then, in the 19th century, something revolutionary happened. The telegraph. For the first time, a message could travel faster than a person. It was pure information, converted into electrical pulses, flowing down a wire at nearly the speed of light. It was a miracle, but it was a miracle that required an immense physical infrastructure. We had to string thousands, then millions of miles of copper wire across continents and under oceans. Communication was a physical network. If you wanted to send a message from A to B, there had to be an unbroken copper path between them. This was the world that pioneers like Heinrich Hertz and Guglielmo Marconi were born into. They were fascinated by a strange, invisible force that had recently been described by the physicist James Clerk Maxwell: electromagnetic waves. Maxwell's equations predicted that light, electricity, and magnetism were all different manifestations of the same thing, and he predicted that there could be other kinds of these waves, waves with frequencies far below visible light that could travel through space. Hertz was the first to prove they existed in his lab in 1887. He created a spark that jumped across a gap and detected a faint pulse in a receiver on the other side of the room. There was no wire. It was a message sent through the air. Marconi was the one who saw the commercial potential. He took Hertz's discovery and turned it into the wireless telegraph, the first radio. But these early systems were incredibly crude. They could only send one simple thing, a pulse, on or off. It was perfect for Morse code, dots and dashes. But the problem was that anyone could broadcast, and anyone could listen. And if two people tried to broadcast at the same time on a similar frequency, their signals would crash into each other, creating a garbled, useless mess. This was the first great challenge of the wireless age. How do you have more than one conversation at a time? And the second, even bigger challenge was, how do you send more than just a simple on or off? How do you take something rich and complex, like the human voice or a moving picture, and encode it onto an invisible wave? For decades, these two problems would drive the entire field of radio engineering. They were searching for a way to put complex information into the air, and a set of rules, a protocol, to keep all those invisible conversations from descending into chaos. They were, without knowing it, laying the groundwork for Wi-Fi. So, let's open the box. The first thing we need to understand is the most fundamental principle of all. How do you get a wave, an invisible wave traveling through the air to carry information. Imagine a person humming a single, steady, unchanging note. Let's say it's a perfect middle C, they just hum on and on. Now, that hum is a wave, a sound wave in this case, but the principle is the same for a radio wave. As long as that hum is perfectly constant, it contains no information. It's predictable. It's just noise. If you wanted to use that hum to send a secret message to a friend across the room, you would have to change it. You could change its volume. You could hum louder for a 1 and softer for a 0. You would be changing the wave's amplitude. That, in its simplest form, is amplitude modulation, or AM radio. Or you could change the pitch. You could hum a slightly higher note for a 1 and go back to the original note for a 0. You'd be changing the wave's frequency, and that is frequency modulation, or FM radio. This is the first principle. Information is not the wave itself. Information is the change you impose on the wave. The steady, predictable wave is just the carrier, the blank piece of paper. The changes you make to it, the modulation, that's the message you're writing on it. This process of encoding information by altering a carrier wave is called modulation. It's the absolute foundation of all wireless communication. Wi-Fi uses a much more sophisticated version of this. Instead of just changing the amplitude or the frequency, it uses complex combinations of changes to pack an enormous amount of information onto the wave. Modern Wi-Fi standards use a technique called quadrature, amplitude modulation, or QAM. That sounds complicated, but the core idea is simple. Imagine our humming person can now change both their volume and their pitch at the same time in very precise, predefined steps. Maybe there are 16 different combinations of volume and pitch they can produce. Each one of those unique combinations could represent a sequence of 4 bits, like 1101. By shifting between these states thousands or millions of times per second, you can transmit a huge amount of data. This is how a simple, invisible wave is transformed into a rich, dense stream of digital information. It's not magic. It's just wiggling a wave in a very, very specific and agreed-upon way. So we've solved the first problem. We know how to encode complex digital data onto a radio wave. But that just leads us back to the second, much harder problem. How do you manage a crowded room where everyone is trying to talk at once? Your router is broadcasting these modulated waves, and your laptop is listening for them. But so is your phone, and your smart TV, and the tablet belonging to the person at the table next to you. They all want to use the same air. If they all just start broadcasting their data whenever they feel like it, you get what's called a collision. Their signals interfere with each other, become corrupted, and the whole system grinds to a halt. It's the radio equivalent of everyone in a room shouting at the top of their lungs at the same time. Nothing gets through. The common misconception about Wi-Fi is that your router is just a miniature radio station, broadcasting the internet in all directions like a fire hose, and your device just sips from this constant stream. But that's not what's happening at all. The reality is far more clever, and it's a beautiful illustration of how you can create order in a complex system with one simple rule. First, your data isn't sent as one long, continuous stream. Whether it's an email, a web page, or a movie, the first thing that happens is that it gets chopped up into thousands of tiny, bite-sized pieces. These pieces are called packets. You can think of each packet like a postcard. It's a standardized little package of information. On the front of the postcard, you have a header. This contains crucial information like the MAC address of the device it's going to. That's a unique hardware identifier for your laptop, and the address of the router it came from. It also has a sequence number, like postcard 1 of 5,000, so that when all the postcards arrive at their destination, your laptop knows how to reassemble them in the correct order to reconstruct the original file. Then, on the back of the postcard, you have the actual data, a tiny chunk of the email, or a few frames of the movie. So now, the job of the Wi-Fi network isn't to send one giant file, but to successfully deliver thousands of these little digital postcards between the router and all the various devices. And it manages this not by being a fire hose, but by being more like a very polite, very fast-paced conversation. The protocol that governs this conversation is officially called CSMA-CA, which stands for Carrier Sense Multiple Access with Collision Avoidance. But we can just call it the listen before you talk rule. It's incredibly simple. Before your laptop or your phone or any other device tries to send one of its postcards, it first stops and listens to the radio frequency. Is anyone else talking right now? Can it sense the carrier wave of another transmission? If the line is busy, it waits. It waits a random, very short amount of time. We're talking microseconds, and then it listens again. If the coast is clear, if the air is silent, then, and only then, does it get its turn to shout its one little packet into the room. After it sends the packet, it waits for a tiny acknowledgement packet from the router. A little "Roger that. I got postcard number 742. If it doesn't receive that confirmation, it assumes that maybe someone else started talking at the exact same microsecond it did, causing a collision that garbled the message. So it simply waits another random amount of time and tries sending that same postcard again. This simple, elegant rule, listen before you talk, is what prevents chaos. It's a decentralized system for sharing a single resource. The air itself, every device is politely taking turns, speaking in very short bursts, and confirming that its message was heard. When you multiply this process by millions of times per second, it creates the illusion of a seamless, continuous connection for every single user. It's not a fire hose. It's a beautifully choreographed conversation, happening at an unimaginable speed, governed by a principle of profound politeness. This brings us to one of the most common frustrations of the modern world. You're at home, you look at your phone, and you see it. Full bars, a perfect Wi-Fi signal. But you try to load a web page, and it's slow, painfully slow. How can that be? You have a strong connection. So why is the internet crawling? This is where our mental model of Wi-Fi often fails us. We think of the signal strength, the bars, as being the only thing that matters. But we've just seen that's not true. Your connection is part of a shared conversation. And sometimes that conversation is happening on a very, very crowded street. This leads us to our big aha moment. The key to understanding this common frustration, and the key to understanding how Wi-Fi has gotten so much faster over the years, lies in understanding that not all radio waves are created equal. The air isn't just one big open space, it's divided into different highways or frequency bands. For years, most Wi-Fi operated in one main band, 2.4 GHz. A hertz is 1 cycle per second. So a gigahertz is 1 billion cycles per second. This is the frequency of the carrier wave we're modulating. The 2.4 gigahertz band is like a reliable old country road. It has two great advantages. First, because its waves are longer and lower frequency, they are better at penetrating solid objects like walls, floors, and furniture. This gives it great range. It can cover your whole house pretty easily. Second, it was one of the first bands to be opened up by regulators for unlicensed public use, so it was cheap and easy for manufacturers to build devices that used it. But it has one massive disadvantage. It is incredibly crowded. That old country road is now a perpetual traffic jam. It's not just your Wi-Fi network using it. It's your neighbor's Wi-Fi networks. It's also the frequency used by most Bluetooth devices, by wireless baby monitors, by your microwave oven, by some cordless phones. All of these devices are trying to have their own conversations in the same narrow space. The listen before you talk rule still works, but now there's almost always someone talking. Your device has to wait longer and longer for its turn to send a packet. The signal is strong, the bars are full, but the highway is gridlocked. To solve this, engineers opened up a new highway, the 5 GHz band. This is like a brand new 10-lane superhighway. The waves are shorter and have a higher frequency, which means they can carry much more information, much faster. The lanes are wider, and there are more of them. And crucially, it's a private highway just for newer Wi-Fi devices. Your microwave and your baby monitor can't use it. So, if you're close to your router and your device supports it, connecting to the 5 GHz network will almost always give you a dramatically faster, more stable connection. But there's a trade-off. This is physics, and there's no free lunch. Those shorter, higher frequency waves are not as good at punching through walls and floors. They get absorbed and reflected much more easily. So while the 5 GHz highway is incredibly fast, it also has a much shorter range. This single trade-off explains so many common Wi-Fi mysteries. It's why your internet might be blazing fast in the living room, next to the router, but drops to a crawl when you go into the bedroom, on the other side of a brick wall. Your device might automatically switch back to the more reliable, longer range, but much more crowded 2.4 GHz band. And now we're seeing the introduction of an even bigger, faster highway, the 6 GHz band used by the newest standard, Wi-Fi 6E. It offers even more speed and capacity, but with an even shorter effective range. The choice is always between speed and range, a fundamental compromise written in the laws of wave physics. We have deconstructed the magic. We now know that Wi-Fi isn't a mysterious cloud of internet. It's a system built on a few core principles. You encode data by methodically changing a carrier wave. That's modulation. You manage traffic by chopping that data into tiny postcards called packets, and you prevent chaos with a simple protocol of politeness. Listen before you talk, and you can get more speed by moving to newer, wider but shorter range frequency highways. It's an incredibly clever system, the result of decades of brilliant engineering, but it raises a final, deeper question. Is there a limit? We're always hearing about the next generation of Wi-Fi, the next generation of cellular technology, 5G, 6G, each promising faster speeds. Is there an end to this? Can we keep making it faster and faster forever, just by being more clever? Or is there some fundamental physical law that dictates the ultimate speed limit for sending information through the air? It turns out, there is, and the story of its discovery takes us back to the 1940s, long before the first router was ever plugged in, to a lone genius working at Bell Labs named Claude Shannon. Shannon wasn't an electrical engineer in the traditional sense. He was a mathematician and a cryptographer. He was obsessed with a single, profound question: what is information? How can you measure it? And what are the absolute, unbreakable laws that govern its transmission? Shannon single-handedly invented the field we now call information theory, and in a landmark 1948 paper, he laid out the ultimate cosmic speed limit for any communication channel. It's a theorem that now bears his name, the Shannon-Hartley theorem, and it is arguably the single most important principle underlying our entire digital world. It is the unseen giant that governs Wi-Fi, 5G, and every other communication system we have or ever will invent. The law can be stated with a beautiful, compact equation, but the idea behind it is incredibly intuitive. Shannon said that the maximum possible speed at which you can send information over any channel, whether it's a copper wire, a fiber optic cable, or a radio wave, is determined by exactly two things. The first is the bandwidth of the channel. We can think of bandwidth as the size of the pipe. In our radio wave analogy, it's the width of the frequency band you're allowed to use. A narrow band, like the ones used for AM radio, is like a tiny straw. A wider band, like the ones used for Wi-Fi, is like a fire hose. The more bandwidth you have, the more information you can potentially push through it per second. This is why newer Wi-Fi standards are always moving to higher frequencies, like 5 and 6 GHz, because there is more unused bandwidth available up there to create bigger pipes. But the size of the pipe is only half the story. The other, equally important factor is the signal-to-noise ratio. This is a measure of how clear the signal is. Imagine you are trying to have a conversation with a friend in a perfectly quiet library. You can whisper, and your friend will understand every word. The signal, your whisper, is very strong compared to the background noise, which is almost zero. Because the signal is so clear, you can speak very quickly and use complex words, conveying a lot of information in a short amount of time. Now, imagine you're trying to have the exact same conversation next to a roaring jet engine. The background noise is overwhelming. To be understood, you have to shout. Even then, your friend might miss some words. You have to speak slowly, using simple words, and repeat yourself often. The amount of information you can successfully transmit per second drops dramatically. It's the same you and the same friend, but the channel has become noisy. Shannon's genius was to realize that this relationship is universal and mathematically precise. The maximum channel capacity, which he called C, is equal to the bandwidth B, times the logarithm of 1 plus the signal-to-noise ratio, Sn. This formula, $C equals B, log_2 1 plus Sn $, tells you the absolute maximum number of error-free bits per second you can ever hope to send through that channel. It's not a goal for engineers. It's a hard wall imposed by the laws of physics. Every time a Wi-Fi engineer develops a new, more complex modulation scheme, like 1024 QAM, they are finding a more efficient way to pack bits into the signal, getting us a little bit closer to that theoretical Shannon limit. Every time they develop better antennas or error correction algorithms, they are trying to improve the signal-to-noise ratio, which raises the ceiling of what's possible, but they can never, ever break it. This law is the quiet, invisible force that shapes our entire connected experience. It explains why your Wi-Fi gets slower the farther you are from the router. Because the signal gets weaker, the signal-to-noise ratio drops, and therefore the maximum possible speed decreases. It explains why that 5G connection that gives you a gigabit per second when you're standing under the tower drops to a fraction of that when you walk a block away. Shannon's law is always there, a fundamental constant of the universe that dictates the flow of the bits that define our age. So let's return to that coffee shop. We started with a feeling of magic, an invisible, effortless connection to a world of information, and we've taken a journey down to the first principles. We've discovered that this magic is really a symphony of elegant solutions to hard physical problems. It's not just internet in the air. It is a system built on the profound idea that information is simply ordered change in a wave. It is a community of devices engaging in a high-speed, polite conversation governed by the simple rule to listen before you speak. Understanding this doesn't diminish the magic. It enhances it. It replaces a fuzzy, vague notion of how things work with a deep appreciation for the ingenuity required to build the world we now inhabit. It reminds us that our entire digital society, our entire global network of knowledge and communication, is not built on magic at all. It is built on a foundation of chopped-up data, modulated waves, and a universal speed limit discovered by a man with a piece of chalk, trying to understand the very nature of information itself. Every time you see that three-lined symbol, you are seeing the result of a century of human brilliance, a system that imposes a fragile, beautiful order on the chaotic, invisible energy that surrounds us all.
You've been listening to First Principles. Until next time, stay curious.